I always think of Tomorrow Never Dies as the Bond movie that feels more relevant now than it did in 1997. Back then, it was just a stylish Pierce Brosnan action thriller about satellites, newspapers, television screens, and a villain who wanted to control the story before the world even woke up. But behind the camera, the movie had its own war going on. People walked away. Scenes were rewritten overnight. Entire countries disappeared from the production plan. And one of the most famous Bond titles of the 90s may have happened by accident. After the massive success of GoldenEye, Pierce Brosnan's second Bond film had enormous pressure on its shoulders. The franchise was alive again, the world was changing fast, and the producers needed a movie that felt modern, expensive, global, and dangerous. What they got was Tomorrow Never Dies, a slick, chaotic, strangely prophetic Bond adventure about media power, fake crises, and a villain who could turn headlines into weapons. But the real story behind the film is even messier than the plot. Here are 7 weird facts you probably didn't know about Tomorrow Never Dies. Before Jonathan Pryce became the smiling media monster Elliot Carver, the role was supposed to belong to Sir Anthony Hopkins, and not just as a casual idea. Hopkins actually arrived on set. He was ready to play Bond's next major villain after his unforgettable performance as Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs. But after only 3 days, he left. The reason was simple. The production was in chaos. The script was not finished. Pages were still being rewritten constantly, and new material was reportedly being sent to the actors while filming was already underway. For a disciplined, stage-trained actor like Hopkins, that kind of environment was not inspiring. It was frustrating. So he walked away from Bond and soon moved on to The Mask of Zorro instead. It is one of those casting stories that completely changes how you imagine the movie. Jonathan Pryce gave Carver a theatrical, almost cartoonish energy, charming, smug, and ridiculous in just the right way. But Hopkins would have been something colder, quieter, more dangerous. A Bond villain who didn't need to shout, because the whole world was already listening. The chaos that pushed Hopkins away did not stop after he left. Tomorrow Never Dies had one of the most pressured production schedules of the entire Bond series. The film went from shooting to release in an extremely tight window, and the screenplay was still being adjusted during production. Writer Bruce Fairstein was reportedly rewriting scenes overnight, including while the crew was filming in Bangkok. Pages would be worked on late, then sent to set the next morning. That explains why the movie sometimes feels like pure momentum. There is always another chase, another explosion, another location, another screen full of breaking news. It barely stops to breathe, because behind the scenes the crew could barely stop either. Pierce Brosnan later joked that the script was not functioning properly in certain areas, and the experience was described by some people involved as painful and exhausting. But somehow that pressure became part of the film's personality. Tomorrow Never Dies is not the smoothest Bond movie. It does not have the elegance of GoldenEye or the emotional weight of later entries, but it has speed. It has panic. It has that late 90s blockbuster energy where everyone seems to be running slightly ahead of the disaster. And in a strange way, that fits the story perfectly. A movie about manufactured chaos was itself manufactured inside chaos. Michelle Yeoh was not just the Bond girl in Tomorrow Never Dies, she was already a serious Hong Kong action star, trained in a completely different film culture, one where fight scenes were faster, harder, and much more physically demanding than the traditional Bond style. That difference became obvious during the production for the bicycle shop fight sequence. Yeoh's full-contact martial arts style was so intense that the regular stunt team reportedly struggled to handle it. She was not moving like someone pretending to fight. She was moving like someone who had spent years doing real Hong Kong action cinema. So the production brought in people connected to Jackie Chan's stunt world to help handle the choreography. That decision changed the energy of Wai Lin completely. She does not feel like Bond's assistant. She feels like his equal. In many scenes, she is not waiting for Bond to save her. She is already ahead of him, kicking through the problem before he even finishes the sentence. And that is why Wai Lin still stands out decades later. She was not written as a decorative partner. She was built like an action hero from another franchise who accidentally walked into a Bond movie and raised the physical standard for everyone around her. One of the most entertaining scenes in the movie is the Saigon motorcycle chase, where Bond and Wai Lin are handcuffed together while trying to escape on a BMW bike. The comedy comes from the fact that both characters want control. Bond thinks he should drive. Wai Lin thinks she should drive. Neither one wants to surrender the front seat. And according to the story behind the scene, that argument worked because director Roger Spottiswoode played a little trick on both actors. He reportedly told Pierce Brosnan that he was supposed to be the one driving the motorcycle. Then he separately told Michelle Yeoh the same thing. So when the cameras rolled, both of them believed they were right. That tension on screen, the looks, the irritation, the physical tug of war came from a real misunderstanding created on purpose. It is a small directing trick, but it gives the scene life. Because the chase is not just about action, it is about two highly capable people trapped together, both refusing to be the passenger. That is why the scene still works. It has explosions and stunts, but underneath it there is a simple character joke. James Bond finally met someone who would not let him take the wheel. In 1997, the BMW 75iL parking garage chase felt futuristic. Bond sits in the back seat, controls the car with his phone, dodges bullets, escapes missiles, and turns a luxury sedan into a rolling weapon. But the trick was much more physical than digital. The car was not actually being driven by a remote control phone. Special effects supervisor Chris Corbould and the team modified the BMW so a hidden stunt driver could lie inside the vehicle and control it from a concealed position. From the outside, it looked like Bond was calmly driving from the back seat. In reality, there was a stunt driver squeezed into an incredibly uncomfortable position, steering the car while using monitors to see where he was going. The production also used multiple BMWs for the sequence, because the cars had to survive bullets, crashes, gadgets, and finally destruction. That makes the scene even better. Today, a sequence like that might be polished with heavy CGI, but here the illusion comes from engineering, stunt work, camera placement, and one very brave driver hidden where the audience could not see him. Bond looked cool because someone else was doing the impossible from the floor of the car. A large part of Tomorrow Never Dies is set in Vietnam, especially the famous Saigon action section, but none of it was actually filmed there. The production had initially planned to shoot in Vietnam, but the permission was eventually withdrawn. The official concerns included issues around explosions and pyrotechnics, but there were also political sensitivities surrounding the Bond franchise. As a result, the crew had to move quickly and recreate Vietnam somewhere else. Bangkok ended up doubling for Saigon. That is why, if you look carefully during the chase scenes, the background sometimes gives the trick away. You can spot details that feel more Thai than Vietnamese, signs, street elements, and little visual clues that reveal the production had to rebuild one country inside another. This is one of those classic Bond production problems. The movie wants to feel global. It wants to move through Hamburg, the South China Sea, Saigon, and secret military spaces with effortless confidence. But behind that confidence, the crew was constantly adapting. A country vanished from the plan and the film simply kept moving. Very Bond actually. When the door closes, find another border. The strangest fact about Tomorrow Never Dies is that the title itself may have been born from an accident. The original proposed title was reportedly Tomorrow Never Lies, and honestly, that title makes perfect sense. The villain's media empire is built around a newspaper called Tomorrow. Elliot Carver does not just report events, he manipulates them, manufactures them, and sells them back to the world as truth. So Tomorrow Never Lies is a clever title. It fits the theme directly, but somewhere in the process, the title was misread or mistyped. Lies became Dies, and MGM apparently liked Tomorrow Never Dies better. So the mistake stayed. That is amazing, because Tomorrow Never Dies sounds like a classic Bond title. Dramatic, sleek, a little mysterious, and slightly impossible to explain. It does not make perfect literal sense, but it feels right. And sometimes that is all a Bond title needs. The irony is beautiful. A movie about controlling headlines got its own headline by accident. A film about media manipulation ended up with a title shaped by human error, and somehow the wrong title became the unforgettable one. Tomorrow Never Dies may not be the most serious Bond film, and it may not be the most elegant, but it is one of the most strangely fascinating. It predicted a world where media power could be as dangerous as military power. It gave Pierce Brosnan a faster, louder second mission. It gave Michelle Yeoh one of the strongest action partner roles in the franchise. And behind the scenes, it survived rewrites, casting changes, injuries, location problems, and production chaos. Maybe that is why the film still has energy. It feels like a machine that should have broken down, but somehow kept accelerating. What do you think of Tomorrow Never Dies Today? Is it underrated in the Brosnan era? Or do you still prefer GoldenEye? Tell us in the comments and let us know which James Bond movie we should unmask next, because every movie has a mask and we are here to take it off.